What kind of Big Mek are you? Today we're here to talk about Dread Mob. Here to present a couple orc archetypes for your Dread Mob. Some, of course, will have plenty of Big Meks. We will be talking about walkers, dakka-heavy lists, grot-heavy lists, and really everything in between, hopefully, that we can cover. So with that being said, we'll also have a 1K list for you new gits that are trying to work your way into the Dread Mob. So, of course, let's start out. And of course, I see the chat. This is live, so shout out to all you guys. And I want to start off right off the bat, good and heavy. Now, I will actually have a layout after I present the list and kind of give some tips and pointers. So where I would possibly put things in relative. Obviously, we don't have the mission exactly, but every single time. But hey, we'll give a little bit more context for you guys because Dread Mob in some ways can be seen as linear because, of course, you want to shoot, but it's a bit more creative than some people may give it credit for. So we have Dread Mob duos. Now, the idea behind this is like a lot of other orc detachments is that you don't need to spam 3x3x3 of everything. Now, of course, there are 3 Big Meks with shock attack guns on this list, so shame on me. No, I'm just kidding. But you can obviously just put a Big Mek, a typical Big Mek, if you wanted different flavor profile, a little bit points off. But in reality, the characters do stay quite consistent in Dread Mob because, one, they're the easiest way to pass the proper keywords to multiple units, and then two, because there's only a certain amount of units that are actually mech type style, right? So now with this list, I like to sprinkle a little bit of everything. I've actually specifically ran this exact list myself. I very much like it. It does quite well. And so I think a lot of people can also relate to it. And it actually has some freaking walkers. So let's get into it. We got triple Big Mek with shock attack guns, a baby mech, and then Zod. 3 units of Gretchen. So it's a little lower than my typical, preferred amount of Gretchen. I do typically like 50. I like 1 big unit with Zod, and then I like the unit with a leftover, like 3 units if I can. But in this case, I did minimize it to just 2 units of Gretchen. That's really for mostly backfield screening in this case because you are slow as Dread Mob for the most part. That's one of the weaknesses, actually, which is why we'll talk about some of the other choices in this list. Now, so because you're slow, really can't let stuff get behind you. You really need to be on your P's and Q's with your strategic reserves every single game. Do never let something get behind you. Nothing can go back and get to it and shoot it or fight it, whatever it may be. So I always make sure at least those 2 minimum size units on my Dread Mob list. Now, we have 2 trucks, only 2. And like, again, a lot of the time speed is a factor, but we do actually have a Gorkanaut on here. So we do have another version of a transport. And yes, we do utilize its transport capacity. There are plenty of reasons why you still want transports, even in your Dread Mob. Because some people would say, well, I can just place up in terrain. As we'll actually look at other lists that have more dakka savvy styles, and they're a bit dakka heavy, but I still incorporate trucks. The reason you want to incorporate some kind of transport is because it's matchup dependent. So Oath of Moment is something that I specifically love to try and avoid, right? And so if your shooting units can be preemptively oathed and then targeted when they come out of Overwatch, well, that's a problem if you just stick to all guns and don't think about any kind of transports or utilizing your transports. So even if you don't want trucks because you simply don't like them or you don't own them or you only have one, still utilize your Gorkanaut capacity, and there will be other Morganauts and Gorkanauts on these other lists we're showing. So I'm just pointing that out now. That way you keep it in your mind that, yes, we do care about the transport capacity of the Gorkanauts and the trucks, even though we're going to be dakka heavy and sometimes infantry heavy on these lists. It also helps you with getting angle of fire because unlike more dakka, you do not get a lot of ways to assault. Now, there are ways to have assault, but the trucks allow your SWAT teams and your other gun units to actually gain lines of fire when they disembark that are important. So I still think trucks are important, just in a somewhat different way than they would be for Warhorde, where you're like, I'm going to stage up for safety. In this case, you're staging up so you can come out and actually get better lines of fire when you disembark, make up for the fact that you lack assault. So that being said, of course, 2 SWAT teams, 2 flash kits with 2 tank busters. Nothing beats the SWAT teams, the flash kits versatility. But you can obviously use burner boys close relatively, or even 10-man units of boys. Now, if you don't have, of course, you don't have flash kits, so you're just going for the 10-man unit of boys. In that case, you could start the boys in the transport and the tank busters in reserve, or just simply hidden, and then they can embark in the transport once the boys leapfrog out, because you want the boys to take advantage of the 3-inch movement from the disembark that'll essentially get them, so they can advance some subs up the field. Now, and yeah, so then we have those 2 tank buster units. Sorry, those 2 SWAT team units. Now we have the Gorkanaut. I'm totally into Gorkanauts, Morkanauts. I think they're fine. I don't love them. I wouldn't say they're amazing. We all know that the meta is quite tuned for murdering them. So if you don't want them in your list because maybe you play against Librarian Dreadnought, Librarian Marines, and they hit you with them a dev wound, put the combo, that's fine. I totally understand if you're just into something that can't utilize it. But for everyone else, if you're going into RTTs or GTs, you're not playing against a specific friend group where they're just obviously going to have the right anti-tank to destroy you. There are times where you can still pull off at least one Titanic Walker. He can be your ingress, but he can also be your staging centerpiece. And we actually have that. We're going to show that a little bit in our when we bust out the layout. Now, what I also have is my 6-man unit of cans. Now, you guys might not think that I'm serious about this. I'm serious about 6 cans. As the meta is developing with still elite units and all different kinds of variety of toughness vehicles, if you're willing to put in the work to make your kilocans work, and we do have a video specifically about kilocans, you can make them work, but I do limit it to simply 1. Now, am I trying to make more work? You know I am. You know I am. But right now, 6 is where I'm at, where I can reliably suggest them to you. They go great into the upcoming meta that there is at the time of you're watching this. We have World Leaders coming out. The new codex going to be released. Death Guard can come out and be released. So Dread, and most people know that Warhorde's looking like it's going to have a hard matchup into these new codexes, or at least the Death Guard codex. In that case, something like kilocans that can push to odd strength thresholds like strength 11 on the WAAAGH. So even if those termies get up to toughness 10, we don't care. You can get up to damage 4 punches in kilocans in this detachment. So this is a a well thought out tech piece. Even the rockets themselves, I know that they lack AP, but not everything is going to be a Space Marine with Armor of Contempt. Therefore, even on something like a Greater Demon or some versions of Tyranid monsters, being able to simply tell them, well, take -2 AP, so you're on your invuln or on your 4-up save, well, then here's just volume of shots. So kilocans are a legit point out here. Now we have 2 units of Ludas. Now, some people would say I only want to put a baby mech on the Ludas because the point cost, they become cheap and they can go out first. I'm totally here for that. 1 unit of the mech and the Ludas would be embarked into your Gorkanaut. And in this case, when your Gorkanaut moves out, the mech can get out, buff his unit, and poke and buff the Gorkanaut next to him. That is an appeal to what this list wants to do. But as for your second unit of Ludas with the shock attack gun, this unit goes crazy on Overwatch in certain matchups. The shock attack gun can be set loose, and you can simply choose the button of lethal because you're probably going to die anyways on that turn when it's exposed. So in this case, when you do pop Overwatch and you do choose lethal, that means every single SAG hit that hits is going to be an automatic wound at -4 AP. And there's a good chance that you have Get Finder goggles on the Luda unit. It's the shock attack gun that has Get Finder goggles on as well. So really a lot of damage potential on good trading in this sense, because a lot of the time your Ludas, if one's not coming in from reserve for that long angle of fire, as we'll point in the display, as in the deployment display, then a lot of the time one of the Luda units is coming out to look at multiple objectives. And in that case, if the enemy wants to respond to you and they end up putting something else to hold that objective, you Overwatch again, then you get erased. That's totally fine. Now, we do have a little bit of speed here. Now, you do need speed on your Dread Mob, and it's not freely given, and it's not always obvious, and it's not always in the package that you really love it to be, but you can get creative. Now, the one obvious piece that you have is Zagrot Wartsnaga. Now, he's a little bit contentious for some people in Dread Mob because he does feel different, as the WAAAGH change only affected this one detachment and this one play style in a somewhat negative aspect, because when you would utilize Dread Mob before with Zod, you could take it preemptively as a defensive measure, and then reactive move 12 with Zod. In this case, what you're actually looking to do is use Zod as, the terminology just slipped out of my mind, but to keep people at arm's length, right? He's actually meant to keep your gun line from being touched, because as a Dread Mob army, you do not have fall back and shoot, fall back and charge, nothing like that. Your trucks are still pretty soft to get disembarked, so there's a chance that an army can shoot your truck and disembark you and then charge you, or they can simply charge the truck and then touch you when you've disembarked. So it's very important, whether it's a lot of Grots or Zogrot himself, that acts as that barrier, the bulwark, that really keeps the enemies at arm's length so that you can lay down fire on people, because you need multiple turns of shooting, because sometimes it's a group kind of effort to kill a unit. Of course, you have access to big shells for bigger gets, so you can throttle damage, but sometimes you're only killing those 2-3 problematic units, and you need to keep everything else away so that it doesn't come touch you on the following turn, so you can turn around and lay the firepower down on them too. So that's what Zod is for. As you're going to see him at least on one more of these lists that we talk about, that's always his thought. In this list, though, you actually have a couple. This is the most combined arms version of list that we have of today, because it does bring the Gorkanaut, the Killikans, and Zod for himself, but we still have the War Bikers. So sometimes you want to hold on to your flash gets, because you don't want your tank buses to be only gets left that are running around the SWAT teams. Maybe you need a little more speed. Maybe you just you realize you looked at the enemy's profiles and you go, well, they have specifically anti-tank and then really trash bolters and small arms. So a War Biker being toughness 6 is just enough to pull out their anti-tank to try to shoot them, a couple las cannon style profiles, or they're gonna, and they're gonna waste their small arms fire because they can't bring some cheap skirmishing unit to come fight me that typically could. Even a unit of jump pack intercessors, unless it's Blood Angel specific, they're not really going to have a good time just clearing all the War Bikers. There's a good chance that they'll at least leave one, and it's really decent for you, and then your flash can come out and kill them, instead of the other way around, where 3 War Bikers, if 5 flashes come out first, get killed by 5 jump pack intercessors, 3 War Bikers aren't necessarily going to go kill them. So they act as like a throwaway trade. They also act as the first layer of keeping enemies at arm length before you pull Zod out. So they can end up going out, search and destroy, straight up roll the advance, get those guys to the corner of the table. Now, what I've actually done, and I'm not saying it as a brag, I'm being serious, is you can take a War Biker and maybe use a shock jump dragster, because search and destroy specifically as well. Search and destroy is one of the deployments that's going to give you a hard time when you're playing Dread Mob, and I do actually change my list a little bit depending on if I think I'm going to end up playing into that and such like that. So even though War Bikers do take up a little bit of your deployment space sometimes, the toughness they bring, they're having a little bit of armor saves. They're not simply just Storm Boys, though you do have 5 Storm Boys on this list. The War Bikers are I get to throw away, but I have a little bit more speed. And then the Flash Gets are I get to skirmish with you and shoot, and I also still get to be thrown away. And of course, War Bikers can simply be screens. So this list feels like it has a little bit of everything, has just enough units for scoring, has just enough units for throttling damage and potential. No one unit wants to eat all your CP, but there's multiple units that would be happy to have your CP. So we have the Ludas that, of course, going to want to do big shells for bigger gets and overwatching. You have the Killikans that want to do clinking claws. They're going to want to do assault, make their weapons assault. And remind you that what's cool combo about the Killikans combo is when you use the stratagem for Orkimatic Pistons and you're re-rolling the advance and you're getting assault. So on that one go turn, when those guys do come in from ingress, or when we talk about the actual deployment, let me pull that up. These guys can, in my big head, can end up being cool. So let me pull out my little pen here. I'm trying to get better with this, guys. What I should have done is actually already set up a little circle like I did in the other video. That would have actually been, I should probably put green, right? Green is best. Am I think? All right, cool. So we talked about where everything would ideally want to end up. So can I make a little square, actually? I feel like I want a square. I had this before, but I didn't, right? Boom. Yes, the squares are going to be my trucks you get. Okay, so we're going to have a couple trucks and a couple other stuff. So when we talk about where we want to deploy, now, the couple obvious spots would be if I want my Gorkanaut to be here. This is one of the one missions, if we're looking at layout 2, where we want, if we have a Gorkanaut, when I speak about his centrality, he can be centered, as well as Zod filling up this same brick behind him if we're looking at layout 2. So when you're coming to lay on the table and you go, okay, I know Zod is going to take up the middle. I know the Gorkanaut's going to be behind him filled with some Ludas. That means now I have 2 different angles they can disembark and actually looking at objectives. So where are the Killicans going? In this layout, I actually like the Killicans on layout 2 to be my ingress unit, which means your SWAT teams have to play the table edges. And you actually have different long angles of fire as well for this layout. So one thing that orc players I think kind of forget is not orc players specifically, but people kind of think of only in a intimidative factor is this angle of fire, right? So this angle of fire that's coming completely up and down this entire field, as if I would say layout 1 is more for melee, right? Because you guys are familiar with layout 1, I can show right here. If we say layout 1 is a little bit more familiar for melee with the staging, layout 2 is a little bit more shooty. And then that's the reason, because of these long firing lanes. Well, when we spoke about the Luda's potential and utility, if you take your second unit of Luda's, this is where you want them to come in from reserve, right? Which means you should be locking down this same building with either a SWAT team, bikers, or your units of Grots. And there is a contestant that you can actually still utilize this building for Killicans, right? So you do need this lanes of fire. You do need to skirmish and fight for this corner of the table if you don't think your Killicans can come here based off your deployment as well. So how you package this list, because it's in duos of 2, it means that you can easily fit a truck and a biker unit staged up around here with Grots around them. You can end up staging up to take this part of the cable with a similar biker truck combo of SWAT teams. You can choose based off your matchup and actual deployment whether cans need to be ingressed or if can actually make their way safely to here. If cans can make their way safely to here on this deployment, you do need Grots to kind of layer them over like around the outside so they can react and move. So I almost think of my Grots going around my Killicans. That way, if enemies want to come in and charge me, I can react and move around that corner, right? So, make sure I mess with this pen a little more. So if your Gorkanauts being centralized and your Zods being centralized and your SWAT teams are taking the borders of the table, that means on your WAAAGH turn, you should be able to hold the enemy beyond the halfway mark. So regardless, however you're playing this mission, you want your WAAAGH might even come early in Dread Mob, not too early, but even a turn 2 or 3 WAAAGH might actually be realistic for you because you need to put the enemy at arm's length away, pick up whatever they have out there, be in position that they can actually try to damage you, but you actually have your invuln, and then your damaging assets come out to shoot and actually start exchanging with their more valuable assets, as you a lot of time as Orc only have one chance at that you're not that reliable, like durable. So making sure that the couple screens you do have come out when you are durable is important. And of course, with Zod being here, it means that he can lock down units that are trying to stage up in this terrain. So you don't have to necessarily kill everything, and which I think Orc players need to also remember too. Now, we should talk about the next list because it's still have a lot of time left and I still have multiple lists. So this is duos. I've definitely enjoyed duos myself. Gives you options, a lot of choice and variety. You're not necessarily the most OP bringing the best meta units in spamming, but it does feel like you have enough of the best valuable assets that you can bring, and you have variety in units that can kind of catch the enemy off guard and end up being important tools in certain matchups. So shout out to that, and shout out to our boy Andrew with 20 WAAAGH Tactic gifted memberships. Whoa! And this is thank you for the support, Andrew, because you're making me remember that this is actually a part of a series. So what we're doing here is, you see, we hitting Dread Mob, and we've been going Dread Mob for a couple weeks now, where I'm breaking them down with the list and how I would use them and the detachment itself. We're going to do this for other orc detachments, every single one, if we can do it quick enough, so that there's an easier way to do this. So if you have a comment or a way that we can make these video or improve them or things you'd like to see, be sure to mention that as well. And thank you to Andrew Stone, because this support is how we're going to get this done. And what I'll mention here as well is when we did the poll on what I'm going to be using for the after action reports, Dread Mob won. So it just so happened that we were covering Dread Mob, and Dread Mob actually won what you guys want to see. So I'll be running lists like this duo list, for example, and you guys will actually see how I run it on the table, and that'll end up being altogether concise into a playlist. That way we can keep referencing these things in the future. So thank you to Andrew Stone. Gets like you are how we have this support and able to do this and improve the content. And my boy Wapo, waiting on the Stompa list. Whoa! Well, I have a Stompa video specifically with Stompa list. So I didn't make a Stompa list because I made like 3 Stompa videos, and I felt like nobody else had that many Stompa videos or content out there, and people would be like, all right, dude, we heard enough. We know your Stomp is real. So don't have a Stompa lift today on this video, but we do have Stompa videos that you should go check out because they're still valid and Stompa still kick butt. So now we move on, and this is called No Zod Dread Mob. So this is actually quite Walker heavy. This actually came from Jack Tight. So Jack Tight actually ended up taking this to a GT. I think he went like 5-1 or something like that. And we, you know, I seen the list, enjoyed it myself a little bit too. But I wanted to bring it back so other players can understand it and see it. Because the one thing I hear the most about Dread Mob is I never get to see enough walkers. Now you do have more dakka, but Dread Mob still brings its own flavor, and in my opinion does more damage. So we start with a Big Mek. Now the Big Mek, you know, the loadout I typically would say is to bring his 3 damage drilla, so you can appreciate the 3 damage, and then I still do bring his custom Mega Blaster, because 1 shot off his tractor cannon simply isn't good enough for me. So that's what I do with my Big Mek. You have triple Big Meks with shock attack gun, 1 with Get Finder goggles, because Get Finder goggles is the absolute auto take enhancement. And then triple baby Meks, 1 is the Warlord. So in this case, it goes together. The baby Meks, having multiple Titanic units, and the Ludas. I love to see it. 20-man unit of boys, 3 minimized use units of Gretchen, 2 trucks, a Gorkanaut, a Morkanaut, 2 Ludas. Both their spanners have custom Mega Blasters because I don't mind going full hazardous, and I expect the unit to get killed anyways within the next couple activations. Therefore, I'm just going all in, and I want it's just consistent amount of shots. If you don't like that, you want rockets, nothing wrong with that. Rockets are totally cool too. And then triple tank busters. This list is quite lean, but it still kind of keeps the same package and idea of what Dread Mob is trying to do. Now, it needs you to understand that you do still lack speed on this list. So with this list, it's actually more aggressive than the other variation that we just presented, but it's actually a little bit more linear to pilot, because there's really not a lot going on here. You have a similar idea in the Big Mek and the 20-man unit of boys sitting in the middle, centralized in your deployment zone, like a Zogrot would if you were running a Zogrot, but instead you have boys that have access to the button and the Big Mek who can reroll their advances and then move through screens. And when you're playing something like multiple Titanic walkers, what do you think people are going to be trying to do? They're going to think that they can come forward and just put screens on you, and that's where the Big Mek gets to actually move through those screens and get stuck into the more juicy bits behind the enemy. I've been using the Big Mek. I would say in Dread Mob, it's a little harder to execute than maybe Warhorde because the movement he lacks, but the reroll advance definitely helps. So, and you really don't need to go through the whole entire enemy model, right? You're not trying to go through everything. You want to kind of go around the edge of the enemy unit. That way, whoever is left can still gain coherency and kind of make like a C shape around the enemy. But your more important knobs and war bosses can go more linear and then, you know, fishtail into coherency, but you still got past the screen. So it does take a little finagling, but it's a similar concept. You need something that can run out, touch the enemies that you don't want to have to kill, that you can't kind of put resources into, or the enemies that have been screened by you in your Titanic units, and you are better off punching because maybe they need to get 1 damage instead of your big shells for bigger get damage, right? Now, the looted units do go inside of the Gorkanauts and the Morkanauts, and then the tank busters still go inside of the trucks. That's because tank busters are slow. You need it really for the speed and positioning. And then the third unit of tank busters, I typically like to put them to reserve, depending on what deployment you'd be putting it on. And then 20 unit of boys right in the middle, 2 units of grots around the, 2 units of grots for your backfield, and then 1 unit that can flex either early to go out and still try to enjoy your reactive move. But this is actually a quite more aggressive version of Dread Mob. This version of Dread Mob does want to WAAAGH turn 2 because it's trying to get the turn 3. So in the early game, you're really just going to be kind of committing grots and probably lutas to clear people off the objective. And then when they've come out a little more, gotten closer, the game's really dragged on a little more. You call your wall because now at this point you're trying to kind of hold down on the durability of your Morkanaut, Gorkanaut, your trucks, your unit of boys, and then whatever gun lines you have led over after that. So even your truck now having a 5-up invuln on turn 3 is what actually helps you kind of carry this list out and through. So a little bit more niche to use, but we've seen it used successfully. It does take repetitions, but I've found that some people don't want so much unit volume on their Dread Mob list, and they want walkers. So this is one of the variations that I found to have the most success and retain the most damage and be the easiest on the clock and the player, themselves, right? The player effort themselves. So we'll take a look at what I got here. The deployment zone. So for this one, it's not as easy because you only have a couple pieces. So in some ways it's easy, like, hey, I only got a couple pieces, so I can easily to figure it out, but not as easy because you don't really have that many options. So you're still centralizing yourself to the being in the middle. But I actually still find that regardless of how this plays out, you're going to need to kind of play the bottom, what we're going to call the bottom south end of this terrain. So both of your Titanic walkers are going to be not too far from each other, but staged up in positions where they can actually still pressure the middle. But you're going to push more towards the enemy's natural expansion. And you're going to use, your tank buzzers, or your boys can deviate to go hold your own natural expansion. Now, I know that sounds weird because sometimes you would say, well, they can go into the middle and duke it out as well. But if it really comes down to kind of it really comes down to matchup dependent. Sorry, is what I really should say. What I really should say is where your position is, they can go either way. So if the Gorkanaut, Morkanaut, whichever one you prefer, is centralized, which I typically like the Morkanaut to be centralized because if you're going to be taking damage and putting them out to the center, I want him to have invuln at all times. And he's less likely to be looking at stuff that's in cover if he's already centralized, but compared to the guy that would be down south. But the reason why you actually still need the boys to be here is because they can deviate. They can either go north into the natural expansion zone, which is typically around here, or they can go through the screens that are centralized and harass the enemy units that are in that. So I still like my Gorkanaut, my Morkanaut and my boys right here, centralized up in the middle. And then depending on what enemy I'm going into, the boys can go this way, and then the Morkanaut can still make his way around to go to the middle. And then also Gorkanaut can run his way through here as well. Because you would think, well, I might get move block if I come down the lane. That's why I don't suggest you move down this lane, right? This is more towards, intimidating the enemy. You might go down that lane, but really you're trying to break through these blue barriers with your Titanic walkers and kind of harass the enemy in that case. You do have the lutas. So even if you're staged up here, the lutas can get out and still shoot at the middle. They can still possibly even shoot down lane to your own natural expansion, and they could definitely shoot here. So that's why the Morkanaut, one of the Titanic walkers still utilizing here is good. Now, if you I find it that you can still utilize strategic reserves like we spoke about, this long fiery lane is very important for your looters can come down, or your even if you have to ingress a big walker guy down that lane as well. So not a lot of options here. It's really I stage up, big brick of boys, Titanic dudes, truck, Titanic dudes, truck, or if it's a different deployment, your truck may be here. You might end up doubling down on trucks because 2 trucks can go on this way because both of them, because a truck can pass right through here. the one can come around this edge and still utilize all the tank buster shots to everything around the middle. And even the shock attack guns could still shoot down range if it needed to. So there is always a chance that you want to go down and shoot down this firing lane. But in my opinion, I found it to be one of the most narrow ones. And really, you just want support here to help clear so your Morkanaut or Gorkanaut can pass through this lane, which is what you have Ludas that are already going to be kind of near there for too. And if you want to, you could put your big Ludas, your Big Mek with your Ludas in some matchups, but I don't typically recommend it because he's meant to be with the boys, in my opinion. But in some matchups, you could put the Ludas with the Big Mek if you think, hey, I'm going to use him to go punch and do other stuff, which some crazy gets do, like Mark Perry. But I don't recommend everybody do it, right? So next thing we move on, oops, that's me, is the Dread Mob dakka-heavy. So this is pretty heavy dakka. Now, this list, we've seen a couple iterations of this. Shout out to Russell, where he's America Russell, where he's taken this and gone 5-1 at events, been #1 orc player at WTC, I believe. He had the best performing. So this archetype has existed for over a year now and been kicking butt. So we're going to just be straight to the point here because we still have the 1K list and then the questions after and the summary. So we have triple Big Mek with shock attack guns, get finder goggles, of course. Triple Mek because you need access to the keyword. And then Zagrot Wartsnaga because you need to keep people at arm's length. Keep that in mind whenever you're building your Dread Mob list, no matter what you want to do. If you don't like the options that you were presented today, there are other options that work moderately well, like maybe a Dev Copty unit, maybe a Def Killer War Track with bikers you might like. But all in all, as long as you know that you need to keep enemies that are in length, because you can't be touched. So that's why you see a lot of Zod on your Dread Mob list. Then we have 10-man unit of boys. I still like my sticky. I still like having boys that can run up and punch. I also felt like this was a little bit more relatable. But in reality, these 10-man unit of boys could easily be swapped for 5 more flash kits. And then you triple down on the dakka aspect of this list. So if you have access to that many flash kits, then go ahead and keep using that. You do have 5 units of Gretchen. 4 of them are minimum size unit, and then 1 of them a maximum size unit. Some people might say this is made too many grots. They don't do damage. They're trash. What's the point of them? Getting people to commit to them early is the point of them, because everything else that you have in your all the other assets are just about laying down fire. So if anybody takes anything off the trade with a grot unit, you have multiple options here that can end up killing them and just end up trading out too quickly. Whenever anybody plays this kind of list, they pretty much say, well, the enemy ran out of resources. So the more, even if you can get up to 30 flash kits, I do advise that. It just depends on how much you're willing to give up of the meat shields. So this is where I found like the bare minimum of enough meat shields and enough dakka, but you can stress it to even more dakka, and it comes from bringing even more flash kits. So we have triple trucks. I still like the triple trucks because I do want 2 flash kits, SWAT teams, and then I want 1 truck for a looted unit so I can get some really nice angles of fire on looted unit early, or because I like to throw a unit of boys and trucks up the field early, a unit of grots and trucks up the field early for this kind of list, because I need the enemy to commit, but I need them to commit in a really crappy trade amount of points. So if I think that they don't have enough guns that have the range to shoot all my grots away, I'll throw a truck up the field, they shoot the truck, and then they don't have enough shots for my grots. If I think they have some shots for my grots, but may probably not clear them all, that's where the boys go up in the truck. So that 3rd truck is actually what I'm utilizing to get the game kind of kick-started along with boys, and to kind of keep the enemy a little bit more at length early game. They come out to shoot them. They come out to take objectives. The Ludas come out. They come out to kill the Ludas, and then they call the wall, and the game gets kick-started. So once the dakka starts flowing, just as long as you have good target priority, the enemy gets melted. Now, the one thing here that's difficult is deploying. What I found the most with this mission, this list when I ran it, was deploying and the amount of dice I had to roll. Just the amount of dice I was picking up. I was using 30 flash kits. So if you're using all 30 flash kits, you simply drop 1 unit of the units of boys and then 2 units of Gretchen. So you do have a little bit less meat shield, but when you go full dock on this, you're gonna have so much. You're gonna have not so much, but you're gonna have so much time invested in rolling dice and the button and lethal sustain, picking out those little things. So this was a little bit my way of making it a little bit more bar to entry. Lowered bar to entry for the rest of the gits that are trying to play with this time of dakka-heavy, but I just had to release the cards and just say, if you need even more dakka and less meat shield, that's how you get it. So as much as that list has so much killing potential and firing potential, which may be something we look towards in the upcoming future as orc players, it does take a lot of time investment, and it has absolutely no walkers. It's not very flavor heavy, and I totally understand it, but we're here to talk about what's killy and what's mean. So for this list, what I really found, it was kind of simple, was that you have a lot of meat and a lot of stuff. Each truck pretty much took a different corner position because they're the only options that you had that were fast. So one truck would go in each corner section of wherever you were deployment of your deployment zones. And then each looter unit, and sometimes your looter units, for example, here would come out early. Would stage up right in this building early because they could just walk out and shoot here. You would utilize strategic reserves, but not too much, because then the enemy can pressure you and just run you over because your assets are all very slow. So a 10-man unit of flash kits, guys, is freaking huge and hard to move. So I try to put them in trucks best I can, and then when it was time to come out, they would combined arms aspect on it too. Still have Zod always in the centralized building. That's where you kind of need him. And then your SWAT team, your 10-man flash kit breaks come down this firing lane. Luda's 10-man break flash kits come down this firing lane. And the list kind of just plays as linear as you would think. It wasn't that I find it to be too complicated like the pilot. It was really about how much dice you're rolling, target priority, CP management, and getting the enemy to invest in early trades. So that's really what I found with that list on all the dakka. And we move on to the 1K list. So now say that you're someone that's looking to move into it. I think you need some reps. You need to practice the units that have the most value. You need to understand the unit combos, the button pressing, all this stuff. This was the most beginner friendly version of Dread Mob that I found personally. So let's go over it. The Big Mek. So the Big Mek with custom blaster, and here we have the power claw. Sometimes in smaller games you need more punches just because you have so low amount. But if you see yourself into a meta of 3 damage stuff still, even at small games, bring the driller. I love the driller. One Big Mek with shock attack gun, get finder goggles. There may be matchups where you would put the Big Mek, the get finder goggles on the Big Mek instead. Depends on where you want to put the looters, but I typically put them on the Big Mek with shock attack guns. Like I said, if you're gonna play into Marines and you're in a little Marine, you're playing 1K, you're only a couple friends, all Marine players. Okay, then get finder goggles and they can go maybe on your tank busters if you really, really want to melt people's vehicles. But the get finder goggles specifically on looters, that way you can offset the fact they only have 1 AP and then their volume actually matters. So I actually really like it a lot. But the Big Mek also enjoys ignoring cover with his big custom Mega Blaster. So we have Zog Wartsnega because I think he is a pivotal, very important key unit that you need to understand in Dread Mob. And at 1K, you need speed. Speed kills. Speed is the way you score. Speed's the way you have board control, and you can't kill everything. So Zod's the perfect tar pit unit. He's a perfect OC flipping unit. He's the perfect early game, positioning unit. And I recommend that you actually utilize him even in small games so you can get used to him. Because the earlier you learn how to bully your friends with Zod and units of mobs, the better you become as an orc player at the fundamentals. 1 small unit of Gretchen to screen your backfield into keep getting to CP heavy. 2 trucks, because I think that whenever you play 1K games, speed is important. And you need the truck so you can get around the field and then continue to score or to keep your assets safe. From, like I said, your friends oath, for example, in your little friendly games, right? Can't ult your looters when they come out, but best believe if they weren't, if they were just walking out and staging out, they'd get overwatched and picked up. So 2 trucks because 1K game speed is important. Then I have 1 Death Tread because I needed an ingress unit. I needed something that felt like he actually had the potential to survive. He does have the ability to reduce damage by 1 in this detachment at range. So in 1K game, it wouldn't matter. Now, I have other videos where I mention, of course, I like to use the nuke. I like to use the version of the Def Dread, which has the custom Mega Blasters and the rockets. And I also like the Hunter, which actually comes out and he has all his claws and he punches, but those are detachment specific, dependent. And my video that covers all the Dread Mob itself, I'm sorry, the Def Dread itself, is a general video. So in this case, with this context, the reason I picked the Triple Scorcher is because it's a 1K game. He's going to be coming in on his own, specifically in the corner of a table, hopefully nice and safe from enemy anti-tank. But he's looking to get into fights with small units that think they're safe, where you've come in from reserves, or he's come in late game after you've used your tank busters and your Ludus to annihilate the enemy's anti-tank. And now you just have a Def Dread with burners that's constantly keeping momentum and shooting up the field. Of course, burners feel better that when you assault with them too. And I don't think you'll have the CP to be re-rolling hits with them with the custom Def Dread. And even if you were, I don't want you taking too much extra hazardous rolls on your Def Dread for the custom Mega Blaster. So if you don't want the Scorcher, then maybe triple rockets could be appealing. But I want you usually to keeping dakka and damage going even in combat. So Dread Mob, the claws are sometimes appealing, but the issue with claws when you're hitting on 3s is that you're still going to miss punches. So I do think Scorcher is worth it, so you don't get tar pitted by someone's 10-man unit of Kroot Hounds, for example. You do have one flash kit unit and tank buster, that's for a SWAT team, and then the Luda unit with the custom Mega Blaster, because in small games, even a couple of those D6 damage shots existing for that one turn to help deal with like a Mephitic Black Hauler, for example, you'll appreciate having on your list. So that's how I feel about 1K. Speed is king, so if we can retain some speed in those games, then please do. So with that being said, that was our 3 Dread Mob archetypes. So what's important about Dread Mob is that you understand that you lack speed, but you got a lot of damage. So incurring somewhat trades with your couple cheap chaff units that you have is important, and occupying table space. So even if you don't like the units that have been specifically selected here, or they don't adhere to your collection, feel free to experiment. Like I said, a shock jump dragster I've taken to RTT and won the RTT. It was really good fun, and he actually did pull his value from his ability to just reposition when I really didn't have enough points to fit a commando on the list, for example, or a unit of Def Compters because you don't own Storm Boys, but the toughness and the additional wounds help with the durability of your overall list. So if you can just think of those core assets and fundamentals of your list of having enough units to have the keywords to take advantage of the damage, not one unit always wanting to use all your stratagems, spread it out through a couple units because a lot of things die in Dread Mob, having enough chaff so you can continue to score even though you have these damaging units, and then just having just enough speed to keep everything off you while you whittle it away with the deadly amount of Dread Mob Dakka. Whoa! And of course, shout out to our paint competition winners. So this will be a series, and like I said, we're going to be doing the after action reports where I show my games off and how I did and the choices I made. So I hope that you guys, let me know what units you guys want me to use. Maybe a list that you see on here you want me to use, or a variation of it, and prove my claims that it's viable. I'd be willing to do that, and it would be fun. So of course, let me represent the Great WAAAGH, let you get stuck in with your guys' great ideas, and we can just propel the Dread Mob forward when everybody gets poo-poo about the position of Warhorde in a couple weeks, right? So, or at least some people, not all of us, because can't keep us Orc players down. Now I'll look at the chats real quick. Shout out to all you guys that were here. Orc Imperium, whoa, what's up, you guys? Hey, what's up, Michael? Shout out to you, Payne. Yeah, I've been paying too, getting my Breaker Boys done, right? Breaker Boys and the Big Mek guys. I'm trying to get that to work. I almost put that on one of these lists, but since I haven't used it enough, I can't in good conscience recommend it. But I do like the idea. Tooth Snatcher, whoa, love that creepy looking picture that you always have. I want to get extra kilocans, yeah, bringing it up to a total of 15. You know, I actually, in the Grot Revolution, I had an army that was 18 kilocans, a Stompa, Zod, some Grots, some Flash Hits, some Bikers, and that totally worked. And you can do that with a bunch of kilocans, and it was a lot of fun, and you can win a lot of games with that and catch people off guard. So you're not memeing as hard as you think, but yeah. Some matchups though, dude, I ran into salamanders and they just melted me. It was kind of funny. So I've never used Gorkin out working on transport, mostly because I'm too scared to deadly mines and emergency disembark. You do want to, don't be scared to get blown up. You're an orc. Come on, man. But two is whenever you're gonna get blown up, make sure you're gonna be able to disembark inside of a building. And a lot of the time I don't really show my Morkanaut, my Titanic units until it's wall time. Don't have your guys like peeking just to chip and like shoot their couple guns at like a 5-man scout unit. Not worth it. Don't do it. Your Titanic walker should be at full health as best he can be until it's that actual wall time, and then he comes out to play. So that's why he's using the transport. He uses the transport so he can avoid people putting buffs on and debuffs on them, or calling, like Shadow of the Warp on them, and then you can end up using big shells for bigger gets on your Tyranid monsters. Well, if they were just out in the open because you didn't want to use transport capability, well, now your dudes fail the battle shock, and now you can't do big shells. So I use it. It's not that you're using it necessarily because you're moving the Titanic too much. You shouldn't be moving them too much. You should be safe until the wall. But I get it though. And as for mech guns, I see you guys talking about mech guns. I've used mech guns a bunch, and I will use them if you guys ask me to in these AAR so I can show them off. And they have never been worth it, even into their ideal targets. They almost did good into like specific Necron units because they're low toughness and I can stack big shells on them. But typically, I just wanted the CP for kilocans, and I'd rather try to make walkers work than the mech guns. If you're in the demon heavy meta, go ahead and bring the tracker cannons and ruin everybody's day. What's up, Wapo? Yeah, 6 mech guns. Yeah, I finished my 12 because when I did take my 18 kilocans to the event, I did lose paint points because some of them were painted. But now I have 12 of them completely ready to go. So yeah. And anymore, yeah, I always want to Stompa. Don't worry, dude. Stompa is legit, but we have Stompa videos. And yes, of course, Death Dreads and kilocans can use a buff. I think that'd be sick if kilocans could just move through cover to move to terrain. What's the ideal unit size for mech guns? 1. Yeah, using 1 unit, like 1-man units, because then they're diverse in the game. They can help fire support. They can do a secondary for you. They don't mind coming in from the table edge from reserves. So 1 mech gun, just like 5 Ludas, I think are totally fine bringing them in. So yeah, and with that being said, hopefully this was helpful. Like I said, let me know in the comments. Let everybody else know as well what you guys want to see from the After Effect reports, what you guys want to see from the rest of these breakdowns. We're going to make them into concise playlists so they can all be informative and concise so you guys can grow in the Great WAAAGH. And with that being said, there's only one thing to keep in mind is don't cross our wall because we not get T-Val. Whoa.